the discipline of dreaming begins first with the mindset that it takes to actually live the dream.
What if the only thing standing between you and your dream career was the courage to believe that it's possible? Well, today I am joined by Sonya Denyse, a visionary guide who helps actors and artists not only dream bigger, but also attain those dreams with clarity and conviction. So let's check it out. What is a dream strategist?
It is a combination of dreaming and strategy, right? Helping people to take the thing that they think may not be possible and bringing it into manifestation. It's what is your dream? How do you bring it to life? And how can I help you manifest it? So, really bringing people the resources, the relationships, challenging them sometimes beyond their desire to be challenged, but to really say, your dream is the answer to somebody else's prayer, question, or need. So don't keep them waiting, and let's see how we can help them get there.
What are some of the challenges you face when you're helping somebody discover their dream and bring it to fruition?
So dream discovery is interesting. I feel like I work with people along every aspect of the journey. Some people lost their dream. Some people are clear about the dream but get stuck. In terms of the discovery process, that's an interesting question because I really want to listen to, well, what have you been thinking about something, and what's in your mind that you don't think this is possible? Or, oh, I have a great client who, Juilliard graduate, trying to get into orchestras, kind of wasn't working out the way she expected it. And we went back to her passion for music and discovered that it was actually cartoons. She had been watching when she went back to being in Detroit as a kid and having to go to the movie theater with her class, and the classical music was part of the cartoon, but it was actually the cartoon that made her happy. So now she has an animation studio. Pivoted from, again, is a Juilliard graduate, can orchestrate, can play music, does all the things. But at the end of the day, it was one part of what she was passionate about that actually distracted her from the thing that she was most interested in being connected to, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. For new actors, because there are a lot, actors come into the business, they're excited, but their dreams are very tiny. They, for the most part, they just want to get a job. They just want to get cast in something. Their thinking is small. How would you help someone like that?
That's interesting. I'm thinking about people who come to the business, right? Come to this idea, and I go back to their why. Because if you tell me that the vision is small, then I'm thinking, well, then I'm adjusting my support to your vision. So if your vision is to just do blah, 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 then here's the strategy for blah, 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 blah. But I actually go back to a conversation I heard with Jeffrey Holder. He was being interviewed. Jeffrey Holder, amazing artist. And I tell this story to check where they are in the trajectory of their journey. Came from Trinidad, the first Trinidadian to dance with the Metropolitan Opera, the first this, the first that. And he says to the interviewer, I never wanted to be known as the first anything. So he said, it wasn't until I produced, directed, did the costumes for, and produced The Wiz on Broadway, introducing Stephanie Mills, that I then introduced myself, because he said, people don't know who you are till you introduce yourself. And I use that as an example for artists and actors in particular. Like, there's strategy behind this. Do you want to be, a one-hit wonder, or are you here for the long haul? So I think that for me, the question is really finding out where they are and how I can show up to support them. Because the other thing that I won't do for folks is I don't go beyond what they allow me or invite me into.
I love that. I'm not that person, but I love that. I will push people. Look here, we can't be thinking too small. We can't. That's not what we're here for. I will bogart somebody and say, "Oh no, we can't be doing that."
And I probably do that by example, by saying, "Oh, well, this is what's possible." But if you can't hold what's possible, then what are you attracted to holding? What is it that you really want? Because we can't get to, and I've had clients come back to me over the years because what they started with evolved, and then they had an appetite for something else. And I thought, okay, well, now we can talk about something else. But to have offered them Shakespeare when they were really, just doing something that was not that would be overwhelming.
I agree. So we started with the new actor who just wants to get the part, and how you help them to anchor themselves in that place to start getting roles. Now I want to switch it to the actor who's been doing it maybe 5 6 years, who's gotten a feel of it, but now they're feeling like being an actor is a burden instead of something, like the excitement that they had. They're feeling like, oh, there's no room for me, I can't do this, or I'm an imposter. All the stuff that comes up once you're doing it for a while, right? Because when you're new, you don't know what it is. So you're open for it, but then you've been doing it a while and you start to hear negative conversations, or you get into a group that are acting like, oh my god, the ceiling is so low, we can't break through, we're always going to be under fivers. So if someone said to you, hey, I've been doing this for 6 years now, I've gotten some jobs, but it's not what I thought it was, and I don't know what to do. I know I want to be acting, I know that I have something to share, but I feel frustrated. I feel lost. I feel like there are so many actors. How am I going to make a difference? Whatever their story is that they have created because of rejections or because they didn't have a strategy, but were doing it the same, insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
What's interesting about that is I'm thinking about people who I know who are in that exact situation. And I think one of the things I discovered, and I appreciate this conversation, people are always trying to network. And I'm often saying, you're an actor. Do you know writers and casting directors? As friends. Like, not because you want anything, but because you're in community with them. Expanding your community beyond waiting for the audition or waiting for someone to find you. What are your strategies based on what you're most attracted to for building out relationships that can make you aware of opportunities before everyone else gets that information, right? So that's one thing. Secondly, and it goes back to who are you and what are you gifted with. If you can envision yourself in certain roles, I had a friend who used to say they would study the soaps and see who they looked like on the soaps so that they would pitch themselves as that sister or that brother or that. I was like, that's brilliant. It's like, do the work to study the industry, because it's one thing to wait for opportunities, it's another thing to either create them or to actually strategically find yourself in a position to be the one who heard about it first. I think it's important to have the right community around you to encourage you, especially because I don't know, like the rejection that actors get is a whole nother level beyond other people. Like it is brutal. And being able to be centered in who you are, why you're in this space, and what you believe you're here to do is a non-negotiable. To just want it, I think, for the applause can be really, really hard mentally. Just because it's and not to judge that, it's just that it's going to take more. It's going to take more than applause to keep you in a career. And again, if you love applause, then write your stuff and produce it and be in front of people and, build your own lemonade stand. Invite people to your show so that you can have the practice, get out there, do the work, and continue to grow. Because the artist that people start off as is not the artist that they end up with over time. So it comes through craft, it comes through practice, and it comes through engagement in the creative process. And if you're waiting for someone to give you access to the creative process, that's a very humbling and also vulnerable place to be if you live there all the time. So I would recommend a multi-tiered strategy for artists to continue to engage in the thing they love to do, which is perform and be in front of folks and do the work.
And I would add to that, to really dig deep into your why, because it's more than just applause or money. People who want the applause and want the money usually don't last 5 years. I don't think. Usually they start to go, well, this isn't working. And I've seen a lot of people who were extremely talented but did not make the 5 year mark because their focus was on something that they had no control over. And they didn't feel like the industry got them. So instead of looking at, okay, well, what is it that I'm giving? How do I show up? How can I be of service? Because to me, being an artist is about being of service. You are of service with your art. Whatever that discipline is, you are of service with it. Yes, there are those superficial artists out there who do their stuff and they're able to work, they're able to make a living, and they're not trying to do anything else. They're in that one lane. They do what they do. You know, I met a lot of actors early on in my career that decided they were just going to be extras because they could be in a film or a TV show, and they could work every day of the week. They had houses, their mortgage was paid, and that was enough. Yay for those people. But if you are an artist who really wants to make a difference, not that they don't, you know, because we need background workers and we need that. But if you really want to make a difference, then you have to stretch yourself. You have to go deep and maybe take different kind of classes that, you know, again, getting outside of that wheel of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, which is different than going deeper. I think actors confuse the two. Well, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. Are you really? What are you supposed to do?
Yeah, I love what you're saying because it's making me think about the fact that there's so many people who are so focused, and not just actors, but in general, people are thinking about themselves. And I often think of seed and soil. If you understand the seed of who you are and the seed of what your gifts are and the seed of what your why in that seed, well, what's the soil? What's going on in the industry? What's going on that set? What's going on in that studio? What's going on in that network? Have you done the research of understanding the environment, not for political purposes and politicking and networking, but assessing the environment and your trajectory? Like, what is the possibility for me in this space? You know, and people who niche down, that's really interesting because you talk about the extras, because that's a niche and an intention. Then there's also the Comic Con folks. They niche down as well, right? So I'm going to do a Marvel thing. I'm going to do a DC thing. Like, so that's a niche because then the Comic Cons become an ecosystem unto themselves. So the question is kind of like zooming out and then it's telescoping. Let me zoom out and let me zoom in. Zoom in on myself, understand my gifts, my talents, my abilities, my why, as you said. Zoom out and go, well, where's the right soil for the seed of who I am? And how do I plant that?
I love that because not every seed grows in every soil. Some plants are very, very delicate. If you put it in the wrong soil, it dies prematurely. Some plants, you can put it in the worst soil and it thrives like nobody's business. And you have to know, are you a cactus, a rose? Are you, you know, because they all require a different soil. Acting is that same way. Going back to community, what community are you in that you are contributing to and they're contributing to you? Because as an artist, you need to be in that environment where the soil is allowing you not just to stay alive, but to grow, develop, you know, get to that place where you have to be replanted, right? You have to expand to go, you know what, I think I'm going to go to London and study, I want to do this, you know, and give yourself that permission to go forth and evolve the way your instinct is guiding you. Now that we covered the new actors, those that have been doing it a while, and those that have built careers but they're not satisfied. How does the dreaming process help them to reimagine their place in today's entertainment landscape?
That's an interesting conversation, because I think about people who have, what I would say is already made an investment. There's a level of IP in the world already because of their work and because of what they've done, and because the entertainment industry is shifting constantly. When I worked with folks years ago, and even when I work with them now, my question is always, when the show is over, when this is done, so what now? What? And so the question really invites them to expand that pot, to go beyond the construct of this particular experience. And yes, absolutely go out for the new shows, and consider the speaking in circuit, or consider becoming a host and a moderator, all those kind of different opportunities. Because as a personality, which is what they've honed and crafted, independent of being a character, most folks that I know who are in this space, or the clients that I'm working with, have tended to also be amazing in a room of energy of people, where they're able to, like, they're transformers. They transform a space. And that transformational energy is actually really necessary right now in the times that we're in. People need to have a sense of direction, positivity, motivation, right? And not for celebrity purposes, but for human purposes. Their humanity is so, so attractive that the conversation is, well, what happens if, again, the show got picked up, but then it didn't get, you know, it didn't last and gets canceled. What else are you doing? So one of my thoughts for folks is definitely helping them to think beyond the industry, but also think in terms of their unique skill sets. And a lot of what I'm probably going to say is it's designed on who they are, not a cookie cutter prescriptive way of being. I'm listening to what they're passionate about. I'm listening to what they've been doing when they weren't on set. I'm thinking about ways that they could monetize and create businesses with, again, that existing IP, and what can they do to empower other folks based on what their sweet spots are.
When you talk to most people about dreaming, are you dreaming? What are you envisioning? They see it as something passive, but it really, to me, is a strategy, right? You're dreaming. You need that time to sit and visualize. The Bible tells us to write down the vision, make it plain. So I want to talk about the discipline of dreaming, and how can actors turn their dreams into a daily practice rather than a distant hope.
So actors often spend a good amount of time investing in their bodies, investing in classes, investing in vocal coaches or yoga, or various things. And I think that mindfulness has become much more popular in recent years, therapy as well. It starts with the mindset, right? It really does start with envisioning and being very intentional about, what is my thesis for this moment in my life? What is the question that I am answering? What are the opportunities that I see? So I think that the discipline of dreaming begins first with the mindset that it takes to actually live the dream. Because what I have found, interestingly enough, is that people start to live the dream, and then all of these other, like, negative thoughts start to show up. They become paranoid about certain things. They can't build community, or they don't know how to write the vision, make it plain, so that others who read it can run with it, because they don't trust people running with it. It's kind of like, but what is this thing that you are called to do, and who's assigned to you in what you've been called to do? And so I think that there's the discipline of getting your mind right. There's also deciding who else is supposed to be a part of this. There are times when it's quiet and it's not a lot of people, and then there are times when it's more expansive, and you can invite other people into the conversation and they can join you. They say when a baby is born, so are the parents. I say that a dream, oftentimes it's similar in that it has a family of people that can help raise it up. So it's also being able to articulate clearly, I've got my mindset right. I've got a sense of what needs to be done. The execution strategy is in my head. If not, I get somebody like Sonia to help me with my execution strategy, because you do need to be clear. Because I've seen it really messy when people don't have a sense of clarity, and then they invite people into the process, and people are like frustrated because they want to be helpful, but they don't know how to help. So we actually also have to empower people with what their why is as it relates to whatever that vision is. I hope that doesn't seem like it's not fun, but it is fun. But I think the discipline of it is being clear with yourself, being clear with others, and then also being clear about the impact that you intend on this dream having in the life of other people.
You had said this when we were talking the other day. You do need a doula. You do need somebody who can walk with you and ask those questions to give you clarity, because it's easy for us to do it for other people. It's not the same doing it for ourselves, because we get stuck in our own thinking and our own limitations. But when you have somebody who can walk side by side with you and say, oh, remember, you do this, because we forget. It is vital when you are dreaming, when you are writing your vision, to have someone, first of all, who is trustworthy of walking with you in that place, because that is such a delicate place to walk in, to share your dream with somebody, and they not be the dream killer to say, well, you can't do that, you can't, how many times, even in acting class, even with your agents, even with your spouse or whatever, and you say, I want to do this, and they go, who do you think you are?
No, that's real. I got to a place at some point where I began to go, okay, I think I'm going to remember this, that there's like four types of folks that I began to assess. Because I'm like a happy dog, like meaning I see folks and I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I had to begin to realize and make some distinctions in my life that there are people who are your fans, there are people who are your stakeholders, there are people who are your team, and there are people who are your tribe. So if I were to break that down, fans can be folks who the energy only goes one way. It's you do something, they are, grateful for that. Now there are people who get fed from the fandom as well, but it's different in this context. And then there are people who are super fans. And the super fans can be people who like know a lot about you, but they're not really your like the energy doesn't come back to you. It only goes out from you. So that's the fan metaphor. And it's interesting too because people are like, well, what's that like? I was like, well, children can be fans. As parents, we are the energy goes one way. But there are some people in our lives who are not children and the energy goes one way too. So and then there are after fans, there's the team. And I began to realize that there are people that I'm on their team, but they're not on my team. And that's okay. Like my clients, I'm on their team. We're not friends necessarily, but then that there are people who are on my team, and it's a different type of relationship when I have a team that is for me as opposed to me being on someone else's team, which is fine. Stakeholders, the stakeholders are the folks like if I had a barbershop and I started to give away free haircuts, it's going to affect all the other barbers because we all have a stake in the barber industry. So stakeholders are people who what we do affects them one way or the other, positive or negative. And lastly is tribe. And there's tribe by blood and tribe by choice. And so thinking about how I interact with different folks in those different spaces in my life has been really helpful so I can be better energetically in how I show up in those relationships. Because if you're curating community and everybody matters, even the fans, it just means that like if a fan called right now and we were doing this, I wouldn't necessarily answer because the question is, do I have the energy to give? And then again with the team, it's very, very important to, you know, gosh, we could be a team of people on a choir or a team of people, praying together. That's a team too. But it's a team designed for a very particular purpose as opposed to the long haul, which is the tribe. Tribe is people you grow with, people that you ride and die together. It gets messy sometimes, but there's enough of a longevity to those relationships where the messiness doesn't take the relationship out. So I had to do that because I tend to be very excited about everybody.
I want to stop at team for a second, because team can make you or break you. If you have the wrong team, You can't move forward. You're stuck in that place. You're expecting them to do certain tasks. They don't do it. They're expecting you to pay them. And it can be a very toxic situation. So I have learned that for me, team has to be win-win. You're getting something, I'm getting something. If it starts to feel like I'm the only one getting something, I'm very sensitive. So if I feel like I'm getting and you're not getting, we have a problem. Or if I feel like you're taking, I'm giving and you just keep taking and you're not reciprocating, we have a problem. And I think it's important to, when you are aligning with team members, to find out what it is that they want. What would you like for your next 3 years? What's your superpower? What do you love doing? What do you want to be doing? And how are you going about it? Because then I have an understanding of what you do and how you do it and why you do it. If I can't read you, I can't work with you. And it's taken me a long time because I would, like you, I would grab everybody. I thought everybody was my friend. I thought everybody was on Team Lydia. And then I was the one pouring out and pouring out. And my tendency is to mother everybody. So I had to shift from being mother to being CEO. And I'm still learning to be CEO and not be mother, because because growing up for me, that's how I survived, was by taking care of people that I had to make sure they were taken care of in order for me to be able to move. And how do you and for actors, I've seen either or, not always both. I've seen very successful actors with or creatives, singers, musicians, with a team that did not support them, but yet they were being fed by that artist. So they were made to take jobs that really were not helpful in order to keep the payroll going. And I think that is such a toxic relationship.
One of the things that I've come to speak about loudly is that there are so many of us who have been trained to be employees. We were educated to be employees, not to be owners, not to be dreamers, not to be entrepreneurs. We were educated to find our identity in work, in that your job description becomes your self description. So there are people who are relying on their entire livelihoods for the construct of a job. We take that mindset out of corporate, out of government spaces, out of nonprofit, but now we bring that into the work that people are doing with artists who can put them on a payroll and who can have them as part of their team. And the idea of taking ownership over your role, the idea of having the vision that if this person succeeds, we all succeed. That's one perspective, right? In terms of how do you build a team as a celebrity, or how do you build a team as someone who's out here trying to do the work of the art and needing people behind the scenes. I remember Steve Harvey talking about not having an agent or a manager because he just needed his lawyer and his accountant at the end of the day, because he had decided based on his style that he was going to be the one who could manage those other pieces, or there was someone in his world who could do that, right? And so I think one of the biggest challenges is that people tend to try to build their infrastructure according to what they see other people do. Go back to your why. What is it that you need that is unique to you? What is it that you might not need certain pieces that everybody else has? So now you've got people on a team who actually are not in their genius. They are kind of excess, and but you're paying for the excess, and now their lives are now attached to your life because you signed up for something that you actually didn't need, because your vision of being an artist was different than your vision of what you were growing as an organization. And so I think that there's a challenge that people have with that. And I have friends who call me often and be like, Can you help me think through this? Yes, I can help you think through this. Do I need to be on your team to help you think through it? No. Do you need somebody on your team who is a strategist who can help you think through things? You might, depending on the vastness of what that thing might be. If you're getting into a new business endeavor and you have no idea what's going on in crypto, get a crypto strategist. Absolutely. If you think that you're gonna, start a community and you want to grow this entity and you have never done that before, pay you just like people invest in their yoga and their vocal coaches. Yeah, invest in a business strategy. And you might not need that for the next 5 years, but you might need it as a startup to get started so you can be sure that what you are bringing forward is in alignment with your why. And the why is not just your why as an artist, but what's your why as a human? Because your artistry is just one aspect of who you are. It's like I like to say, the umbrella with spokes or the wheel with spokes. What are the various spokes of your identity and of your energy? And then do you have the support you need in each of those areas? And toxicity, I think, tends to happen when people aren't honest and they don't feel like they can be honest. And then add to that, now your entire identity is attached to this job. We're experiencing that in different places, and it has nothing to do with artistry. People experience that in a 9 to 5, and all their eggs are in that basket because that's what we've been trained to do. So it's kind of a setup for it to be toxic. There are people who love what they do and love where they work, and it's because they're community first, and then they grow into the work. But then there are people who come into that space and it's just not a good fit, but we're representing ourselves as if, oh, no, no, this is fine. But it's not fine. Your soul is crushed, but you keep showing up acting like it's fine, and you're not serving the person you're working with, and you're not serving yourself because mentally you're undercutting your energy.
You're also selling yourself out for a check. And I would say that's the first thing when you are in a job that you are maybe overqualified for, or in a job where your spirit is crushed every single day. Then you have to look at, why are you selling yourself out for that check? What is it about you and the fear that you have of not moving forward to saying, you know what, this isn't working for me. I got to figure something else out, because maybe I don't leave today, but I got to come up with an exit strategy so that I save myself. And I have to know, hey, okay, I'm only here for 6 more months. I've I've come up with a plan to make my money and start looking at what I can do so I can leave better than I came, so that I'm not, hurting anybody in the process. But I got paid to do a certain job, so let me do that job. But in the meantime, let me look at what my other options are, because I think sometimes, and this I've seen this happen to actors, there's no work coming in. They have certain skill sets in other areas, so they take other jobs. And that becomes their life. They hate it. They're not doing their art, but they are afraid to let go of that paycheck. They don't like the people they work with. You can't have joy if if your spirit is crushed. You can't walk in joy. And God created us to walk in joy. The Bible tells us to have joy in trials and tribulations. So even though things might be a little difficult or a lot difficult, not to let anything steal your joy. Don't let it steal your joy. How can you turn the situation around at your job? How can you turn the situation around in your home? Maybe you have to move. Maybe you have to let go of the roommate, let go of the relationship. It is about taking care of yourself in a different way. Sometimes we have to prune our environment in order to get to where we want to be. You were created to do something marvelous. I believe that everybody, no matter what it is that you are doing, it should be marvelous. It should be something that you walk in with joy. As I was listening to your story, your childhood reflected facets of my childhood. I grew up in a very chaotic home. My mother, I was, my mother was a single mom. There was 6 of us in the house. My mother threw out my oldest sister because at 13, so I became the oldest one in the house at 5. And at 5, I had to be the adult. I had to go looking for her when she got drunk in the middle of the night and left us alone. I mean, it was just a lot for a kid. But what I will say to you is, in that chaos, creativity for me was overflowing. Not only that, but problem solving for me came. My secret, my 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 special my gifts started showing up because I could talk to anybody at any time. I knew how to maneuver my way through situations. I heard you talking about how at a very young age you knew you had these creative gifts, so you picked up the phone book and started calling places to see if you could get in, how much it was, and if they had scholarships. And I think that when you live in chaos, if you already know that you have something of importance, and you know your worth and your value, you're not tied down by the situation that you are in. It just makes you blossom quicker.
It's interesting. You make me think of the term cream rises. Cream rises. And that also with where conflict encourages creativity. And so I totally resonate with a lot of what you said. And it actually goes back to what we were talking about with being in toxic teams and toxic jobs. And it made me think of the statement that I've been hearing recently about people negotiating with the lowest version of themselves. And I realized that when I'll say it again, negotiating with the lowest version of yourself. There are folks, whether it's in family situations, whether it's in professional situations, if I've started a conversation or started an engagement or started an opportunity coming into that space with the lowest version of myself, then what I'm experiencing is actually the result of that. That I have not given myself credit for everything you just said earlier about being able to be here to do something magnificent. I haven't given myself credit for being talented or having a gift. So I will take and accept an abusive situation, whether it's familial, personal, or professional. Because if I've negotiated with the lowest version of myself, then I've accepted other people talking to me according to the lowest version of myself. And then the problem is we start to complain and blame other people. But we're the ones who said yes. We said yes to not being our awesome self.
No, I think it's important because as artists, sometimes we get stuck in that place. We don't get the validation. We get confused with our art and validation. We don't honor our superpower. I had a lot of superpowers as a kid, and I had big vision as a kid. So my growing up in Spanish Harlem did not stop me from getting on the bus, going downtown, maneuvering. I was very independent. I had that sense of purpose. I was on a mission. I had vision. And so that really helped me during the difficult times because I always, where do I want to get to? Where do I want to get to? That God had put that in me. And I had a relationship with God at a very early age. Don't ask me how, but I had this relationship. So for me, what came first was not mindset, but spirituality. The connection of being with God and say, okay, God, what do you want? Let's go. Let's go, God. That I was always doing a check in with God. And then it was like, okay, this is what I want to do, God. Let's go. Let's go. So as a kid, that was my compass, was the spirituality and the mindset. And when people said I couldn't do something, I was like, yes, I can. Yes, I can. I can do that. Yeah, I can. And so it led me places because I had that yes, I can attitude. And I see a lot of creatives, I don't want to say they don't have the can attitude, but they feel like that's not available to them. that all the excuses start to come. And I was a visionary. When you talk about being a dream strategist, I think I've always been a dream strategist. I've always helped people with their stuff. Oh no, you can do that. You can do it this way. Let's go. What do you want? Let's do this. And so I always had that sense of, we are here with a purpose and a vision, and it's our job to discover what that is and go with it. And so growing up, because you commented, I heard you comment on this a couple of times, of your quirky brilliance, that you felt you were different, but being different became one of your superpowers. How did you navigate that as a kid?
You know, you don't want to be different when you're a kid. You actually want to be accepted. But there were a couple of themes that really, it pattern matching at the end of the day is what we call it now. But my family's from the South. I was raised in the city. I would go down south and I was different. I was a city kid. Imagine the 5 year old down south with, their family. And it's kind of like, why are you so this way? Always performing, writing plays. My imagination was such a gift. And so it almost felt like at a certain point, to not own my difference would be betrayal to myself. And I think that's why and it was isolating at times. And then I had this one friend that was so cool, because it felt like, okay, I can be who I am and still be accepted. And not to say that I didn't have friends at school and that I wasn't popular in certain ways. I was, but I've always had a particular way of seeing the world. And I think that also the pain of being rejected by someone who I thought was a friend. And when they rejected me, the comment was, "You're too special." And I was just like, wow, really though? And I thought, well, this pattern of pain is not something that I'm going to continue to entertain. And I know that sounds really heady now at this point, but I stopped. I thought, this is setting me up to try to be, going back to the statement that I didn't realize it connected, the lowest version of myself. So in order for me to be your friend, I can't be special. What? Like, that is stupid. Like, you're special. So I recognized that I needed to decide and lead in and own it. And that was, like I said, isolating at a certain point. But I preferred that to what I was being offered by those painful experiences. And I just really, from a mental perspective, thought, I'm going to have to decide to just go all out. And so, I excelled to the point where, and I had a group of friends who decided they were going to excel too. And I feel like I found them because I left the other opportunity behind. And then ended up in different relationships with different folks that were empowering friendships, empowering mentors, and started going down a path where I had this wild sense as a kid that we were all amazing. And I began to look at, like, the Apollo was closed when I was a kid. And I always felt like that was horrible because I grew up with an uncle who was a tap dancer at the Apollo with, like, in the 1920s and 30s. And I would have pictures of folks like Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington, Fats Waller, and Pearl Bailey. And I was consumed with those headshots and what those stories were and what their lives must have been like, right? So going back to the Harlem experience where there were a lot of abandoned buildings at the time. And then I began to look at people in my life like hollowed out buildings, feeling like their potential was there in the structure, but because the building had been abandoned, so had their potential. So that theme of develop your potential was a non-negotiable for me from an early age. And so that's why I got the phone book. That's why I, looked for programs going, wait, I have gifts. My gifts can help people, but my gifts are raw talent. I need to develop this talent. That was an ongoing theme, which led me to the High School of Music and Art, Performing Arts. Because I thought, oh, I could get trained for free. So I'm getting into this school. And that's kind of where I ended up. discovering, curating, and developing more of my gifts.
So that being different, so many artists feel different when they're growing up. They feel like they don't fit in. And so coming in to the art, not feeling like you don't fit in, but feeling broken because you don't fit in becomes a detriment to artists instead of taking that I'm different and really stepping up with it to go, I am different. I am, I'm here for a reason. Let me do this. I mean, because I, like you, I felt I was different as a kid. First of all, my mother was an ex prostitute. My father was a number runner, formerly her pimp. And, within the community, there were people that judged. And then there were people that were part of that whole, I learned how to sell from a prostitute. I sold chocolates and she taught me how to sell chocolates. She was like, okay, if you're gonna do it, then you gotta do it this way, baby. When you go, and that was part of acting for me as well. So I had friends like you, but not friends who I aligned with. And I knew that. So I spent a lot of time by myself creating. What I learned was that my mission was not connected to friendships or anybody else, that I had to, this is what you're doing and you can have friends, but just know you're going on your own journey. So they may not be there and people will betray you and people will take advantage of you. And how do you take care of yourself? How do you walk? And I think that if artists can hold on to their dream and know we may be friends today, but we may not be going down the same path. It's okay to be okay about it. That you're going to be okay on your walk. You're going to be okay wherever you have to go. You're going to be okay because God is with you. God's got you. And so for me, going back to mindset, yes, mindset is important. But if you don't have that spirituality, whatever it is, to anchor you, to say to you, you got a bigger vision than what people may see you have. And that's why I love the idea of dreaming, the giving yourself that freedom to dream big, to dream, because if you can connect with that impossible dream, it's going to take you a great way, because I do think that's God downloading in you. When I was a kid, hanging on the stoop, I would look at the planes going by and I'd tell everybody on the stoop, I'm going to go on that plane to California. I'm going to California. I didn't know anybody in California. I didn't know anybody who could get me there, but that was my dream. And at 18, I ended up getting on a plane to go to California. And I think that when you have big dreams and you are focused on that, you start to speak it and work toward it. You manifest it. I was a great manifester as a kid. I was like, I'm doing this. And I did. And I didn't ask anybody's permission. I didn't ask anybody, what you think about this? I was like, me and God. Okay, Lord, I want to go meet Frankie Crocker at BLS. Let's do this. I mean, that was just me. I did not wait for stuff. And I say all this to say, when you feel different, that it really does help to honor what is pouring out of you and not wait for somebody to give you permission to allow you to be that person, but to be that quirky, brilliant person you are. Own it. Say, this is who I am. I'm not like you.
And that's fine. It's so interesting to hearing you. It gives me another angle for this idea of dreams and the courage that it takes to own your dream, to own yourself. But the other thing that has to happen is that we are a ministry to one another when we are honest about our dreams, because because of someone's dream that we're living in a particular scenario. It's because of someone's dream that we are inspired the way we are. It's because someone had an idea, had the courage to execute that idea, and then either we were inspired by it, invited into it, or we're benefiting from it. And so when we don't do that, we leave the world a little less empowered and empty without that particular thing that you are uniquely designed to bring to the story. I think that's an important thing from what you said that I was processing. And I also think that people need to own their genius. We talk about superpowers, but there is genius that people have, but because it doesn't look like someone else's, they don't know if it's okay to own it. But of course it is. Although it's uncurated, maybe underdeveloped, and if again you're negotiating with the lowest version of yourself, you don't even recognize that genius. So I think that I align. I started calling myself quirky brilliant because I recognized that I started getting feedback from other people that I was different. Even now, like as an older individual, it was just like folks would say things. They would go, you're different, right? And I would go, okay, but so are you. Like, and so what do you really want to tell me? And I was like, I could be quirky, but I'm also absolutely brilliant, as are you. So, I really wanted to give people the freedom to be what they were. By calling myself that, I was inviting folks into their own authenticity.
So I want to go back to Harlem because you mentioned the all the people, all the artists, all the talent that came from that community that you were aware of as a kid, as I was. The difference is I got to go to the Apollo uh pretty regularly because when I was a kid it was happening. You during the 4 o'clock show you paid $1. You could see the tech rehearsal. I mean, they didn't call it that, but as an adult I know now that that's what it was. It was just a tech rehearsal that they had, and then they would do a movie, and then the show, then another show. So I think they would do 2 to 3 shows during the week with a movie. So I was very cognizant of the fact that Harlem was an incredible place for creativity and talent. And that's what I held in my heart. And I read all the biographies. I would just get lost in the biographies. That was my escapism, was to read on all these people who came from my neighborhood. So they validated for me that, yes, we were special. So I want to know your take on it because you started to hit on it with the pictures that you saw from your uncle.
So I will say that I've called Harlem a place of dreams. And I think about my parents leaving North Carolina, North Kakalaki, and coming up here because they had a dream for a family. And so I've always felt inspired by the culture of Harlem and always been really grateful that I felt like I didn't grow up down south, because I wouldn't have gone to the High School of the Arts. I wouldn't have had the exposures to the things that I had exposure to. And so I do feel like Harlem helped to shape me and refine me, and also offer me opportunities, having worked in different theatrical companies from the administrative perspective, really going behind the scenes to bring things forward. I've always felt like artists needed to be supported. And so what could I do to be that individual who's not trying to be on the stage, but actually trying to produce, resource, raise money, invite people into the place where they get to live out their dream as artists. So I think that's part of what I would reflect on in terms of my Harlem experience.
So I want to talk about your artistic abilities as a kid and how you parlayed that into getting into the High School of Performing Arts, and then from that going to NYU.
So I went to a junior high school that actually Harry Belafonte went to. So that was another one of those inspirational things where I was like, oh man, if he could do it. Anyway, so I was excited about that. And I would basically dedicate myself through my lunch hours to preparing for the audition. And also, I was the stage manager of a play on 18th Street, got on the bus every Saturday to stage manage um, as a junior high school student. And I prepared for that audition for months. Once I realized I could go there, and I found someone, her name was Sonya Denyse, bless her heart, who helped me to get ready for that audition. And I got in. I got into the school. There is another story that's part of this that's interesting too, because it has to do with facing your fears. But also, I was so excited to go to the school. I had made it for both voice and acting, and had decided that because vocal lessons cost more money than acting lessons, I was a vocal major, and that was cool. And I was so excited to do that. Although I had gone to the principal at the time, and my junior high school was right down the hill from the high school. So I went to go see him and asked him, if he could merge the program. Who am I? But I thought it was a good idea, and I thought that there might be other people like me. So I wasn't just, trying to be all whatever, but I felt like, why not ask? And that level of like curiosity and just asking questions is very indicative of who I am. Well, okay, so here's the story. So I had the opportunity to perform my monologue in front of the entire junior high school audience. And it was a moment. I was so excited because when we talk about being quirky, talk about being different, every time I took the stage, I was somebody else. Folks were like, man, you're really good at this. I had somebody cry, and I thought, oh, okay, I think I've got a gift. I got on the stage, and I will explain more about that. But as soon as I took the stage, the entire audience of maybe about 300 students started laughing. And I thought, oh my goodness. And I got peristalsis. I didn't throw up, but it freaked me out in a way that I had never experienced before. I never had stage fright, never. And I thought, oh my goodness, now I'm going to this high school and I've got stage fright. Like, oh shoot, like what am I supposed to do with this? And so the story goes that I decided I was always going to push against it, but every time I took the stage, that experience always was present, and I would fast. I was an actress at NYU. When I got to NYU, I became a actress in their creative arts team and had my tuition paid for, but I fasted every time I took the stage because that experience, and I really had this statement in my mind: don't let 5 minutes affect 50 years. And while it was a great idea, I was still always struggling through that energy. And so fast forward to 2020, I'm working with a talent agency. We decided we're going to go to virtual. So we're doing a virtual webinar, and they asked me to be one of the people in the webinar. And I was like, ah. And so I was done with it. I was like, why do I always have this feeling? Like, I'm so over this. And I was talking to a friend, and we were in a conversation, and she was like, you know what? Go back to that moment. Go back to what, like, you present, you go back to you on stage. And as soon as I visualized going back to give that younger me a hug, I busted out into tears. And it surprised me. And she was like, why are you crying? I said, because I failed myself. So coming from the background that I came from, and the struggle to be a performer and to develop myself and develop my potential, performing and doing well academically were the two things that I did for myself that nobody could touch. No matter how crazy it was in the world, that I owned those spaces. And so to have felt like I had to throw up and not been able to perform on the stage, even though I got through the monologue, nobody knew, blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, shoot, I failed myself. And she said to me something to me that has stayed with me ever since. And she said, you're every age you've ever been. And I was like, wait, what? She said, you're every age you've ever been. And I promise you I stopped crying. And I said, okay, great. And she was like, what? I said, well, then all I have to do is choose to be the person that I was before that trauma happened. So I choose that person. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I'm good now. Like, literally, that freed me. And I keep this. So as life would have it, somebody took a photo of me before I got on stage. And I don't know if it's going to show, but this is the photo of me right before that traumatic experience. And I have on what I call my Michael Jackson socks. And my character was Snoopy from You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And that was the winning monologue that got me into performing arts. And so performing that was great and all the things. But that photo is full of confidence, expectation, joy. I am the queen of my domain. And that experience was just simply a trauma that I decided to hold on to too long. So while I don't perform and I really do enjoy being behind the scenes, if I am asked to step onto the stage, if I'm asked to do something else, I simply go, okay, I'm going to choose to be this version of myself and not the version that was about to throw up because both are available to me. I just prefer her. And so I think that's an important story to share
Mhm.
in the journey of my performing career.
So I want to talk about you getting in NYU. You're coming in, you want to act. What was it that flipped you into deciding I'm going to work behind the scenes?
That started in high school, actually. There was no tech program, but I started doing stage managing in high school and also in junior high school. So that dual being on stage and being behind the scenes was tracking. And I think the frustration for me is that I found there were so many talented people who were waiting for opportunities. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go create them and then invite them to it. Because for me, I thought art is always going to be created. It's going to be under the table. It's going to be in the closet. Artists are always going to be artists. They're not going to not do that. But what we do need are people on the other side who are creating opportunities for them, opening doors, helping them with the strategy of what it's like because of the vulnerability that I felt that artists had with taking the stage. I'm thinking, who supports them to continue to do that work? And so the pivot for me was honestly Whoopi Goldberg on Broadway. I'm in high school. I see the VHS and I watch her take that audience from laughter to deep sorrow. And I thought, oh my gosh, the ability to do that is phenomenal. And while I could be on stage and do that, because I know I've caused people to cry, what would it be like to actually support people who are bringing that forward, bringing more of that forward? And again, it was an avant garde, one woman show. Her whole journey to get to Broadway was phenomenal to me. And I thought, okay, we need more people creating new stories. We need more people supporting getting stories out. So while I could have been activated as an actress, I actually was activated as a producer.
I love it. I mean, I find it so incredibly selfless. You know, you have this dream, you want to perform, you want to do this, and then all of a sudden you go, you know what? They need the help. Let me help them.
I think it's also being multi talented gave me the freedom to say. So also, I'll say that when this is a cool story. So one of the reasons why I was able to be comfortable not acting when I was in high school is because I directed a theater group. And so in directing the theater group, one day we are at a performance and most people always assume I'm younger than I am, blah 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 blah. One of the people in the audience said, well, how has being in this group helped you? To me. And I said, well, actually, I'm the director. And she said, oh. So afterwards, she came to me and she said, so here's a heads up. What you just spent time doing and performing for us for, we pay people to do that at NYU. And you can get tuition remission. And I said, oh, say less. So I ended up being invited. One of the team members, it was wild, freshman in college, one of the team members had gotten ill. She remembered that she had met me the month before in May. My teachers literally wrote me like whatever I had to do to finish up my finals. They worked it out with me. I started performing with them because most people would have to audition. I jumped right in, learned whatever they were doing, went out into the school system, which I had just graduated from, and started acting. And then they called me back in September and said, hey, do you want to come in full time? And I was like, yeah. So I worked for them for a full year, had tuition remission, and then recognized that I could spend a long time going through college, working with them, and yes, getting it paid for. But I had finally found what I wanted to do, which was that kind of the management of things and learning. And I was at NYU had a school called Gallatin where you could design your major. So I was able to actually make it count since I was paying for my education. I was able to bring all that together. But I checked the box, professional actress and tuition remission. Say like yeah, that is phenomenal. So I feel like that's what happened for me. I gave it away because I had already fulfilled. Not only did I fulfill it, I challenged that fear every morning that we got up and went into those schools and performed, and I fasted into those performances so that I could own the stage once again. So it was I was good. I was like, check.
Side note, what made you think about fasting? How did that come about?
That's funny. So honestly, practically, I wouldn't throw up if I had food on my system. So I fasted because just in case I did get nervous, there was nothing there to come up. But also from a spiritual perspective, it was an act of I'm going to die to self. I'm going to push this fear as far away from me as possible. And I'm going to allow the Lord to fill me. And what's powerful about the performing arts, like the creative arts team at the time, is that we were going into the high schools with students who were struggling with all sorts of things. And I thought, wow, I was just here. I'm 19, 20. I know what they're feeling and experiencing. And using the art as a way to empower them creatively, it felt like an act of service. So sacrificing and not eating was part of having clarity of mind. Technically, I wouldn't throw up, and also being able to be used as a vessel.
I want to back up for a second because I heard you talking about your mother and you going to church. There was a point as a kid that you were angry at God. Tell me what that was. What happened to you?
I have amazing parents. I want to first give honor to my parents. They were young, young and in love and immature, as that happens, right? So no shade there, but I think that my experience from when I was aware till the age of 12 about what that relationship looked like and what it created, the atmosphere it created for my brother and I was underwhelmed and I judged it. I judged it hard, and I judged it so harshly that I decided I was an atheist. And too much to my mother's like, what? And I'm like, well, it actually doesn't make sense to me. Life shouldn't be this hard if there's a God who loves us. Full stop. I'm just not, I'm not impressed. And I promise you, I didn't say it like that, but I'm sure the tone was there. She had taught me to pray, all the things. We were not going to church. And I think it was other faith things happening because she wanted to help us with that. But it was a lot of contention between she and my dad at that point. And he was not a person of faith at that time. He later became such. So, without too much detail, I was attacked in a church and recognized that I could have been unalived by the experience. I was 12. I was like, whoa, what just happened? And it wasn't a small thing because it was, the school that I was a part of at the time. It was a summer program. There was a lot of like mistrust at that point because your child is supposed to be safe. But it was not a safe experience. And but what happened for me is I thought, oh my goodness, I actually didn't have to be here. So this little situation that you have going on with you and God, I felt like the presence of God was with me in that situation. I felt like the presence of God actually pulled me through that situation and is the reason why I was alive. And I could have been found dead. And I thought, okay, so kind of need to get to know the presence that was with me in that moment because that actually is confirmation that I am not here by myself. And though things are not always pleasant and great, there is a love that has me that is there for me. So I didn't become a Christian at that point. I actually started to just read. And I remember fast forwarding to being down south. I was I was not the kid who wanted to go down south to visit my grandparents. I'm telling you, I was like, why? And I remember being in church, and I was clearly like I was processing a lot and taking on a lot and trying to fix things and solve things and all the things that I shouldn't have been doing as a kid, but why not? Because that's what made sense to me at the time. And I remember this picture of Jesus and all the little kids sitting around him. And she said, the scripture was, let all the little children come unto me. I took the come unto me and then I kind of added into it, come unto me, all of you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So I put those two scriptures together. And I said to the Sunday school teacher, who kind of looked at me like, what? I said, so wait. So this means if I bring my burdens to Jesus, like he'll take them? She was like, yeah. And I'm like, no, but seriously, like I can give Jesus my burdens and he'll take them. And she was like, yes. And I thought, okay. So got back home after that Sunday, went to the bedroom that I was staying in at my grandmom's house, my dad's mom, and I was like, Jesus, hey, so I heard I can give you like my burdens, and so I'm gonna do that because everybody else has failed me. Please don't. That was my prayer, straight up, and I was like, okay, wait, like what's supposed to happen? And I didn't feel anything. Like there was like no like. So I went out. I was talking to my grandmom, and I said, "Hey." So I probably did say, "Hey." By the way, this sinner's prayer, like accepting Jesus in your heart, how does that work? And she was just like, again, from the word, if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, you'll be saved. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna go back and do that because I want to get it right. Because I'm like, listen, I've been talking about you not being around. Like, I want to believe you. And then I was like, okay, I'm a Christian. And then the next 2 years, my life got incredibly awful. I was just like, wow. And that's going from junior high school into high school. And then I had this amazing experience meeting a wonderful friend who just came to hang out with me, and she was talking, and she was very much into being an evangelist at our age. At 14, I was 14. She was, I think, 16. And I said, and she said, so she said, do you know Jesus? And I said, oh yeah. She said, you're on the force. And I thought, what do you mean the force? And she was like, like Star Wars, Darth Vader, Jesus is good, Darth Vader bad. I was like, okay, I'm on the force. And she was so excited. And we became friends for years. It's been such a lovely journey with her. And I got it though. I got that I was in warfare. And that from the time that I said yes to the Lord, yes to accepting Christ in my heart, I didn't know what I had done, but somebody else did. And so it did not get better. It got worse. And I didn't turn away. I just thought, I must be missing something. But now I say in a more mature and refined perspective, and this actually blessed me because when I first became a Christian, I was a Disney Christian, which is like, oh my God, no, no, no. It was just very up here and like no depth. And I expected this kind of I ask, I get. And it was just like, wait. There was no transformation in that. And there was this thought of, how do I become it? This is not just about Christ signing off on my goodness, right? I'm a good person. So I wasn't, and I began to realize there was a depth to my experience with God that I had not yet journeyed into because I was expecting that I was okay. And I was like, no, 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 you're not okay. This is not the way this works. It's about being in a relationship and being transformed by that relationship. So what I say now, and this has really helped me and it matured me, is that God allows in his wisdom what he could prevent with his power. And so my thing was like, Lord, let me love you for what you allow. Because if it's based on what I would prefer, it would separate me from you, which is where I started at 12, being separated. So that's where I am today.
Thank you for sharing that. For me, growing up, and I didn't know this scripture, but I said this scripture: what the devil intends for evil, God works out for good. And as a kid, I would always say, everything I'm going through, God, you are going to make me be able to help other people. That was my stuff. And again, growing up, going to Catholic school was not the same as having relationship with God. There were many in Catholic school. There were regulations, and I remember having discussions with the teachers, the nuns, the brothers, when they would say, well, you got to pray to Saint Mary or Saint Joseph. I said, but I don't want to. I want to go directly to God. Why should I go to the secretary when I can go to the man? And when I was about 10, 11, my mother sent me away. She would send all of us away basically for the summer to Fresh Air Fund. And so I spent a summer with Amish people, which changed my life in a lot of ways because they raised the barn for church. I mean, and their church was a barn, and it was just pews and a cross, a bare cross. And I remember I said, well, where's Jesus? He's not on the cross. She said, because he left the cross. What? And then I said, where are the saints? She said, what saints? I said, I knew it. And that was, that was all I needed. I ended up going back from my experience with the Amish people. And I told the principal, I said, I am not going to be doing confession anymore because that's not godly. I'm not doing that. And I'm not praying to saints. I just want you to know, I already saw what the truth was. And they let me get away with it because I was a big seller at the school, which was very important to be able to sell all their little things, all the drives. I was the master seller in my grade. No matter what we sold, I excelled. And so thank you, Purita, the prostitute. But that's how it was. So I had a relationship with God outside of all of that because that was my refuge when I was a kid, in the middle of chaos, in the middle of horror stories. God was always my refuge, and I was like, okay, God, okay, we got to do this. And you talk about being in a situation where you could have died. There were many, many times that I was in those situations, gunfire, being semi abducted, stuff like that. But God always had his hand on me. So I didn't have the same I just knew who he was. I was like, okay, we're there. So I thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of times people have difficulties with God when they're in a negative situation. It's like, well, why aren't you not doing, how I'm doing all the good things, but why? And they don't recognize the warfare, thus the fasting. You used fasting to help you in the thing. I have probably the last 35 years used fasting as part of warfare. And I am a big believer in fasting, not necessarily food, but sometimes you got to fast certain other things. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. I want to get to the AI and actors, how actors can use, because you are in that space of AI and kind of maneuvering and being able to use the AI spaces to do better, as opposed to feeling like AI is coming for your job. AI is coming to kill creativity. So can you talk about your journey with AI and how you have embraced it? Because you are one of the masters that I know with AI. You really navigate, and we're in an AI group together, and I see her do all this magical stuff. So it encourages me. But go ahead.
I'm going to start with mindset, which is kind of how we started in a couple of different places around the AI to get to the idea of what can be done. And it comes from our background. I think we've talked about turning positive things. I mean, taking taking negativity and still surviving it. And for many people, AI is negative. And so my disposition is that things are happening for me, not to me. I am not a victim of any circumstance or situation. So with the AI of it all, I'm too curious to be feeling to feel like, oh, I can't, we got to stay away from that. So I instead decided to jump right into it. And so having worked at a talent agency called UTA, I was able to talk to two amazing individuals who I've literally watched them talk to each other for 3 months. Lindsay McInerney and Kathy Hackle. They were interviewing each other about the metaverse. And again, being super curious and knowing that the world was changing, it was during the pandemic. I spent a lot of time like watching them and listening to them. And I promise it was like 3 months of just listening to that conversation and digesting it. From the metaverse conversation, I ended up reaching out to both of them. They both ended up signing with the agency through my invitation and with another amazing agent who we worked to help them with their speaking careers. But now that I had been in this conversation around the metaverse, well, then there was Web3, and then it grew from Web3 to AI. So I found myself in groups where we were processing the impact of AI on the entertainment industry. We were looking at what was possible, what to be careful of. And I think that back in the day when apps were the thing, people used to say there's an app for that. Well, now I say there's an AI for that. We are nowhere near where we're going. And so my disposition with AI is to stay curious and to continue to amass information. And also, I like to say it's like a keyboard, and the keys of the piano are starting to reveal themselves as we play to keep playing. So one of the biggest things for me that was super obvious is when AI, and I remember Justine Bateman having the protest, and we're not going to use AI with film, and it was like, okay, somebody will. So that's a choice, right? I heard someone say when the printing press was created, it actually created more jobs than it took away, and that made me go, okay, well, we've been here before. So if we can future scope the development of where AI is going, the people who are experts in these spaces, the masters who have these skill sets, getting in the conversation to actually identify where they think the future is headed is much better than standing off to the side. Protesting is one part of it, and no shade to that, but helping to shape policy is probably a better position for me. So yeah, I feel like with the opportunity that actors have with AI, one of the things that showed up for me was pivot to theater, from an economical perspective, look for theatrical opportunities or produce theatrical opportunities, because AI is not necessarily showing up in live performances in that way. Yes, there are holograms and people are doing different things, but it's still clunky, and that's a certain level of investment to bring that forward. I can't imagine going to see a theater play. I can't see Hamilton as holograms. Like, I can't do it. Right. So being an artist, it again, where's the soil to put that seed? I think that also playing with AI as a tool, playing with AI as a tool to empower this ecosystem and this industry that is going through massive change. There's someone who's developed a really cool kind of thing to help people prep for auditions through AI. Like, there are people out here innovating at a time when, instead of being afraid of it, there are ways that we actually could engage with it. And it's an assistive tool. It will assist you to the extent that you allow it into your process.
What are some AI tools that you like?
Pseudo write is something that I've been looking at. Pseudo write kind of helps with creative writing ideas and things like that. But for me, again, it's about playing with it, not ingesting it. I used to use Jasper, but then Jasper felt like it was built on top of a lot of AIs. So I left Jasper, but Jasper's still dope. Um, Perplexity
That's
is my go to
that's my jam.
for
That's my jam. Between Perplexity and
listen.
Chat, they're my jams.
Yeah, Perplexity Chat, and I'm pretty sure there's some other ones that I play around with. I used to do Midjourney a lot. Everything has AI in it to the extent that they want to be relevant. So Canva, um, I love to use Grain when I'm doing meetings for recording purposes, summaries, and on my website. if anybody wants to get a discount, the the QR codes over there with the discount codes are on my website. Lovable, lovable, super lovable.
And your website is?
Dreamdevelopment.com. I'm committed to learning more things and applying them and using them for research and to really help people monetize their dreams. Like that's the direction that I'm focused on. The creator economy is amazing, and I think that AIs can help creatives find new revenue streams. Quite frankly,
We're at a time where it's not enough to just be an actor for hire. You have to do your own projects. You have to have other things set up to bring in monetization. It's not just about let me get a role in this movie and then I'll be set, because they've changed the game as far as actors really being able to make a living on let's say a TV show. They will shoot you out in a week. Instead of you having 3 months to shoot something, they will shoot all your scenes out in a week and get rid of you and lessen your paycheck. So um you don't have that income to rely on.
yeah. So it's been long thought that people should be making sure they are collecting the email addresses of their followers and not relying on these social media platforms because we are the product of those social platforms. And I think that finding unique ways to engage with their audience, to discover their audience, to find out the needs of their audience, to the extent that actors have that level of following. The newer actors, I think that there are AI tools that they should be investing in to refine their ability to digest scripts, to prepare for roles, if it's that traditional route. But also, people are looking for work because of what you just said. So the other opportunity is to find out what does it look like to produce your own work and what AI resources can help you do that. There's a company by the name of Toonstar, um, and they are pretty interesting. They're an animation studio, but they've been able to reduce the cost of animation by building AI tools that they're using to create animation, and they're releasing it on YouTube. So the other thing that happens for us is that we know the story of Issa Rae getting on HBO's radar through her YouTube show, where production is down 40% and people are looking for distribution channels, but you've got people watching YouTube on their televisions. Why are we not engaging with YouTube as if it's a distribution powerhouse to access the audience that we need? I heard Roland Martin speak recently, and he talked about the fact that most of his contributions actually are not coming from his subscribers. They're coming from people who are just watching a show on YouTube. They're not subscribing, they're watching. So, to the extent that there's more playing field, more tools to play with, more keys on the keyboard, it's a non-negotiable to do the research. And I'm not an actor. So if I were, then I would be looking to do research in those spaces for those things. So that's a distinction for me. But I've said to people in the speakers industry, make sure you have a YouTube channel. Make sure that you're releasing your content on your YouTube channel. Start to use that to source opportunities that you might not have access to otherwise.
And have a social media presence. It is important that every actor has a platform that they have staked their flag in the ground, and they are using it to let people find them. We are in an age where you have to be tech savvy, where you have to know how to create content on, whether it's you just talking to camera and saying a soliloquy from Shakespeare or a monologue from a TV show, but for you to be findable, that the industry is looking for actors that have a social media presence, that you could be the best actor, but if they're looking for an actor who has a social media following, you may get cut out. There's still some producers who don't care, but it seems like that is becoming the norm. They want to know what your social media following is. You know, they want you to bring numbers to the party. They don't want to do all the heavy lifting. Can this actor bring an audience? It reminds me of, I did stand up for like 14 years. And in the beginning, every show that I did, they only wanted to hire you if you could bring a minimum of 10 people. And so I was like, well, wait a minute. If I'm bringing people, then I'm going to do my own show, which is what I started doing. Was I'm not bringing people for you. And it's, it's just morphed into something else, because back then there was no social media. We didn't have any of that at our fingertips, but now you need a following. So you need to make content that people are engaging with, that you're catching some kind of heat. You cannot go that old route of, I'm just going to send my picture and resume, because even as an actor looking for work, you're not going into auditions necessarily. You're being asked to do a self tape. So you have to be your own filmmaker as you are going for acting roles. So you might as well take all those skills that you've been learning in self tape and create a web series, create a little mini YouTube channel. You have the power. You need to know that you have the power.
So, from the creator economy perspective, I think that it is a non negotiable at this point to bring your own audience. BYA. Bring your audience, right? That's necessary. I want to acknowledge that there are people who are artists who just want to act, they just want to sing, they don't want to do all the business of it. And mad respect, you'll get hired by other people who are doing this because they don't want to be in the details like that. They really just want to bring their art forward. So that from a purist perspective, this is not for you. That I just want to make sure I'm like designating to say there are folks who are entrepreneurial, cultural entrepreneurs who are out here just trying to bring these things together. So these are tools for their toolbox. Bring your own audience is a strategy. I think also that OBS is a platform that I'm actually talking to a lot of different clients about and creatives, because I have a new endeavor, which I'll share. I think that live streaming is the next thing, right? We see tremendous success with things like live shopping on TikTok and things like that. And so I've been talking to clients recently about, through an endeavor that I'm working on, helping them to go live. And that by going live, you are finding your audience, curating your audience. It's like doing a Kickstarter campaign, but you're actually going live to invite people, the audience, into the experience of your art. So it does mean that you have to think about what you want to talk about, how often you want to be live. But then the other part of that is, because of the creator economy, there are people who are able to invest in you right in that moment and say, I like what you're talking about. So here's a tip. Here's something that can put money back into your pocket. And I think that it's hard to look away from those things when you see that there are people who are actually thriving. Not that everybody is, but it is an opportunity for people who have a to turn their phones on, go live, and empower themselves financially, meet and engage with new people who will then start to follow them into other places. And then they've got folks that they can introduce into opportunities. And as a creator, it gives you more to negotiate with folks who want to bring you in to increase the visibility of their projects because you've got X number of followers.
For those of you who are curious about what OBS is, let me break it down for you. OBS is a popular free open source software for live streaming and video recording used by creators and broadcasters worldwide. And so it's just something you download into your computer and you can do it. There are also other types of software that do the same thing, like Ecamm, which is something I use all the time, Riverside FM, StreamYard, and Restream. There are quite a few, and going live is the current trend right now to help you monetize. If you are big on Gary Vee, he talks about going live on TikTok and selling whatever you have, that's the way of the future. So, and we're seeing it now. So I appreciate that you brought that up, because as actors, we don't have to be victims to the business. We can create our own stuff. And if you don't want to do that, don't do that. But if you want to really make a living and know that you don't have to take these temp jobs to keep you going in between, I would say consider that. I want to ask one other thing regarding how to connect the dreaming with goal setting and manifestation.
I think that the company is called Dream Development because I actually, and I had a couple of sessions with clients um, in a way where they get to download all of it. Just la 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 la. What is it that you imagine? The craziest ideas, no editing, download it, right? The other side of that is the development, because not every idea that we have is an idea that is right or right now or even executable. So, from a manifestation and a goal setting perspective, the one question I would often ask people after we kind of go through this process of here's what you want to do, here's every angle that we could possibly look at it. Here's the question: if you knew that fulfilling your dream today could save somebody's life tomorrow, what would be the first step that you would take? There's urgency in that question, there's clarifying focus in that question. Yes, let's dream. But so many folks are like, well, I'll do my blah, 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 blah when I do X, Y, Z and this. And I'm kind of like, no shade to preparation and doing more things to equip yourself, but you already have something. You have a vision. You see a need, and there's somebody who needs you to fulfill that need. What would be the first thing you would do? So I appreciate goal setting as an exercise, but it starts with the first step that you would take after you download your vision. You think about what it is and you think about what you want to do. How do you get there sooner? It might not be perfect, but if it could save a life, it's perfect for them. So that's where the goal setting begins. And then we can ideate on top of that. And manifestation is this amazing thing that happens when the opportunity for you to actually serve and have an impact is realized. And that for me is kind of like waking up at a new day. It's very magical. It's like, oh, cool. Like, who could have thought? I had a client who has an amazing show, one woman show called I Didn't Cry. And at the time that we met, and it shows about her mother, her sister, and herself, and her sister's abuser. And it was right around the time that people were not talking about HIV. And so she would play all the characters, uh, bringing awareness to HIV and domestic violence. And we had gone through developing the show, developing different budgets. What would happen if the Kennedy Center calls? What happens if the local school calls? Like all of that. She was in Puerto Rico and ended up meeting at that time the governor's speechwriter who said, send me your budgets because we are interested in bringing your show to Puerto Rico. And I thought, see, that's manifestation, because the work that we were doing was getting her clear. She had the seed, she had soil, had to think through how to represent that and how to budget it and how to pay for it. But you're in Puerto Rico and you happen to meet the governor's speechwriter? Okay. Like, you were prepared for that moment. And so that's one of those manifestation opportunities.
Julia Cameron calls that synchronicity. When you align your dream, your work, and it all is coming together. Nothing happens like that. There's a coming together. There's a convergence of idea, of the work, of the wanting to make it happen, right? Because there are a lot of people that do a lot of work and then they put it back under the bed, or they put it in their closet and they I don't, this is not important. But when you commit to pursuing that idea that is bubbling up in you, and you do the work and you do it, things will happen. They will happen. And that's where I think someone like you really can be useful, because then you can guide and be the doula project to come to life. I want to know, where do you see yourself in the next 3 years with your dream development company?
I my three keywords are creativity, curiosity, and connection. I think the world is changing so much that I want to double down on the curiosity and connection, because I think that's going to determine what Dream Development 5.0 looks like, right? And so I have inklings of the things that I think are important. I, believe that one of my gifts and one of my superpowers is introducing people to the people they need to meet. I'm responsible for children being in the world. So their parents go, this is your fault. And so listening for who we need to know and making sure that I help to curate connections that empower us to grow as a community. I think that the live streaming of it all, I'm kind of focusing on definitely bringing clients to that opportunity so that they can empower themselves as creatives. That's another major endeavor right now. But I think that I could end up creating something interesting based on the 20 some odd years of dream development that I have had the experience of, and creating something that allows this process and this ideology to live independently of me, that people can have it, serve them, and grow with it, challenge it. It should morph. I think that staying relevant is a non negotiable for purpose. And that people who think that, oh, my purpose is over because the world has changed, I would challenge them to say that we need to get back to the why. So my why is to really help people live into their legacies beyond beyond their wildest dreams, quite frankly. So it's how do I show up and do that? That can change, but as long as the question is, what do you need and how can I help you get there, is part of my SOP, my standard operating procedure. That's what it's going to look like for me. Showing up in spaces where people have a question and I can be the answer to that question for their impact.
How big is connection for creatives?
Well, sometimes for us as creatives, we feel like we're operating in a vacuum, and it can feel really isolating. And I think that finding community is something we've talked about already, but connection to the art, connection to the process, connection to the funding, connection to the audience, it's a non-negotiable. We're not existing on an island, we're existing to engage. And so connection is something that I don't think creatives can get around it.
Yes, nor should they. And I would say we're past the pandemic, hopefully, thank Jesus, and we need to reconnect with people. Get back into that, getting together with people, setting up dinners with creatives, attending events with creatives, being part of community with creatives, not just. I love Zoom. I love connecting with people that you can connect with globally, but within your community, you should and this is me being bossy with my creatives, that you should every week, every 1 day a week, you should connect with people face to face, because there's nothing like being at a table or in a space with another creative that is different from being on Zoom. When you're in close proximity, you can feel who they are, you can feel the sincerity, you can feel the love, and you can also feel the inspiration that sometimes you can't feel on Zoom. And you definitely, I can never feel it on text. I'm always, was that a joke, was that a real thing, what was, it's hard for me, it is hard for me to discern what that text is. I have to hear your voice. I have to see your face. I have to, because some of us have very wicked senses of humor. Some of us have a dry sense of humor. And and text don't necessarily give us what that meaning is. And so I just think as creatives, we need to be in communion with each other more. And because I do believe that the pandemic kind of stopped that for a lot of people. And they're still not, like, I am purposely making a point that every week I connect with somebody physically, going out, having a meal, sitting, because for me, I got happy if I did because I didn't have to go out. I was like, we're shut down for a year. Oh, hallelujah. I can be home. I'm not running around doing stuff. So I am working on getting back out there and doing, and being part of the world.
Yes, I am an introvert with a little bit of extroversion, and I can disappear for days and people not see me, and I'm happy. So the invitation to engage with people is real. The pandemic was great for me, unfortunately, in a way that I was able to meet people across the Zoom that I still have yet to meet, because I that worked. I used to have during the pandemic gratitude calls. And so on Sundays from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., I would just leave my Zoom open and have people across the country join at different points in time, just so they could have a sense of connection. But being quirky, I'm probably a little socially awkward. So there are times that I'm like, oh, I'm out with people and I've got to turn it on. But then it's like a pair of shoes. Like if you wear them too long, your ankles start to hurt. So I have to like come away, regroup, refresh, and then get back into it. So I think people do need to find the rhythm that works for them. But I think you have to have the balance, because if you don't, you're only playing one note, you're only singing one note, and life is balanced. So I totally agree with that. I have a poem that I want to share with you. It's called Cargo, and it's by a man who's no longer with us named Greg Kamora, but it is powerful. And it says, and this actually explains dream development. You enter life a ship laden with meaning, purpose, and gifts, sent to be delivered to a hungry world. And as much as the world needs your cargo, you need to give it away. Everything depends on this. But the world forgets its needs, and you forget your mission. And the ancestral maps used to guide you have become faded scrawls on the parchment of dead pharaohs. The cargo weighs you heavy the longer it is held. And spoilage does become a risk. The ship sputters from port to port, and in each you ask, is this the way? But the way cannot be found without knowing the cargo, and the cargo cannot be known without recognizing there is a way, and it is simply this. You have gifts, the world needs your gifts, and you must deliver them. The world may not know it is starving, but the hungry know, and they will find you when you discover your cargo and start to give it away.
You are a gift, Sonia. You are an incredible
Thank
gift.
you.
I want
Back
to
at
say
you.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all you do and for being of service and for loving on artists. You gift artists their wings. So thank you, because we need people who see us, who believe in us, and who help us grow. Well, that's it for today's episode of Acting Smarter Now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I really do want to hear what you have to say. And if you love what you heard today, please support me by buying me a cup of coffee so we can keep this show going strong. And don't go anywhere, because coming up, I've got another great episode to help take your career from undiscovered to unstoppable.